I tried, but I have to be part of the first yeah, very negative years. I'm still in the master's year. I'm a physicist. I also studied science and my master's right now is urban technology. So it's kind of far away from what I do, but not at the same time. I work with disasters, so you can see, yeah, like nuclear testing, we have all these guidelines, all these documents, all these strategies, and we use for, I don't know, airplane, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really wonderful scientists came up to like academia, for example, it's really hard to speak to the average person because we are used to be on science and these terms, and it's really difficult for us to be speaking to an average person. So when we work, we tend to be disconnected, and we are not communicating. So that's a very huge issue. And if you're trying to make like policies based on science, you have to be able to communicate. We are not doing that. So it's tricky. It's very difficult. We're working on that. But of course, as scientists, we need to be responsible and say, okay, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be economic, for example. Because we don't learn about it in our careers. We learn calculus, we learn algebra, we learn all these other stuff. You always try?
Nice, good. I'm happy in Korea. I helped you get in.
Oh, thank you so much. I would be it's on.
fun to get this. And when you realize that real work doesn't work as and something simple. Now that you see it, it's something more simple. I don't know if I was good enough to I got my mentor. I was see really nice. You really should know her. To meet her. Her name is Megan.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Friday morning. Let's do it and have a very interesting and very important discussion this morning. Before I introduce it, I'll introduce myself. I'm Yelena Sokova. I'm the Executive Director of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation. It is my honor and privilege to be invited to moderate the upcoming session on disarmament and development. Just a little bit of an apology here. We're a little bit short on chairs, so I will be hanging over this podium for the entire session, but the speakers will speak from the floor, from their chairs. Just the a little bit of a housekeeping information. And I'll start with saying that the CTBT has been discussed this week extensively. It's a key component of the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation architecture. It's the treaty banning nuclear testing for everyone, everywhere. However, there remains a strong divide between disarmament, development, and human rights agenda. As most recently highlighted at the COP27, these silos need to be broken. There is a recognition within the disarmament community that a sustainable development goals agenda is linked to disarmament, notably to SDG 16, but this linkage is not always evident. With time running out for the achievement of the targets set by the 2030 agenda, additional momentum needs to be built to advance the Sustainable Development Goals, making this agenda more inclusive. The CTBT, although not formally integrated into the Sustainable Development Goal indicators, directly support several of these goals and promote disaster risk reduction, life below water, climate action, alongside peace, justice, and strong institutions. This panel will aim to develop creative ways of looking at the linkages between the CTBT and the Sustainable Development Goals, and showcase some of the best practices in this area and discuss where in the future what we could make that contribution much more significant and expanded. So with that, I'm really delighted to have such a diverse panel today, coming with experiences working in the development arena with human rights and other areas. And I will introduce quickly our speakers, and then we will have our discussion and give them all the floor to hear from their views. Ms. Miriam Medel Garcia is the Chief of External Relations and Advocacy and Policy at the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. She worked for more than 20 years in this field, including diplomacy, international relations, multilateralism, and sustainable development. Our next speaker is Mr. Roy Trivedi, who is formerly the UN Resident Coordinator for Timor-Leste, and previous positions also included working at the UN Resident Coordinator and UNDP representative in Papua New Guinea, and various other UK departments. Worked in Tanzania, Central Asia, Caucasus, and various parts of Africa. Mr. Jose Rosenberg is a senior liaison officer at the United Nations headquarters in New York, and have been representing CTBT at the UN since 2017. He is a former career ambassador with the Ecuadorian Diplomatic Service. Mr. Pierik Miali, he's working at the CTBT here at the Preparatory Commission and is product specialist at the International Data Center, but also has a long experience working on the various technical issues, but also looking for civilian and scientific applications using CTBT data and various other products. And then we have our two wonderful representatives from the young group of the CTBT youth group. Amina Abdelkai, who is a Bachelor of Science in Nuclear Engineering at the Alexandria University in Egypt. She's lab engineer and physics teaching assistant at Physics of Earth and Universe program at Zivail City of Science and Technology. So fantastic to have you here. And finally, last but not least, is Vicky Joy McKenna Riungu. She's also a member of the mentoring program here. And she's a young enthusiastic geologist with experience in hydrogeology and geophysics, clear understanding of hydrogeological data collection, processes, analysis, and presentation. Completed several of the CTBT programs here, as far as I understand, and looking at the challenging positions in organizations where that will effectively utilize your skills and experience in this area. So with that introduction, I'm really looking forward to what our panel could discuss on the connection between the disarmament, development, the CTBT work specifically, and we'll start with Miriam, and I would ask her to say a few words why the 2030 agenda is important today and why it is key to further break the silos, getting everyone on board to contribute to it. Miriam, the floor is yours. Does it work?
It is working now. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to thank my friends at CTBTO for this invitation. It's really a pleasure to be part of this panel. Also because it brings me back full circle. I started my career as a desk officer on disarmament in the United Nations General Directorate at the Mexican Foreign Affairs Ministry. And back then, which is many years ago, I will not tell you how many, the silos were there. So it was, but everybody wanted to work on peace and security, and everybody wanted to work on disarmament. And then sustainable development, we were starting these conversations about the Millennium Development Goals, and it just looked like, oh, these people are thinking about something, etc. And then it just became the other way around, and the SDGs agenda became much more relevant. I think the silos responded to the situation when the United Nations was created and the way we decided to organize ourselves as a multilateral organization. So we had peace and security on the one hand as one pillar, the second pillar, sustainable development, and the third pillar, human rights. And it probably worked because we developed many regimes and many rules and positive outcomes in the three of them. I mean, we do have a lot of comprehensive treaties for disarmament, and we hope that CTBTO will come into force soon. We also have the Rio Conventions and a lot of work ahead in sustainable development, and we do have a full body of law, of international law related to human rights. So it really worked back then. But if we fast forward to now, 2022, we are really in a crisis. I mean, I don't say this lightly. You all heard all the outcomes from COP27. We, as humanity, have pushed for of the 9 planetary boundaries that have been determined by science that allow human existence on this planet. My daily business, which has to do with land restoration, I can share that 70% of the Earth's land surface has been modified by human activity. 40% is degraded. And then all of this has, climate change is a reality, is an emergency for everybody right now, and all of this has an impact on societies, on economic outputs, on peace and security, on forced migration, on health, etc. We pair this with COVID-19 and then with the geopolitical turmoil of the current years, and then we have a perfect storm. So we are in a crisis. We need to move to a crisis footing. How? By breaking the silos. First way to break the silos is to put people front and center. And I really think that this humans-based approach is what is needed going forward. So we worked very well 75 years, a little bit longer, on these 3 pillars. Sectors, also governments and society work that way as well. They were developing. Development had to do, and economic growth was sectoral in the approach. But we do need to move to a whole of society, whole of government, whole of multilateral institutions approach. We have the SDGs as the blueprint for a fair, prosperous future for people and for the planet. And here I actually would like to challenge you to think of the Agenda 2030 as a whole concept and not break the SDGs by goals. They all depend on each other, they all underpin each other, and we will only be successful in achieving them if we tackle them together. Then that is the first blueprint. Then we have human rights agenda as a major backstopper for the SDGs, and then we have the peace and security agenda and the transformation that needs to happen through there to support the SDGs implementation. So I would say it is really time to transform the way we think about United Nations and start considering the interlinkages between the 3, as I said, based on a human perspective. I work, my daily life is about environmental issues, about land restoration, drought resilience. And often what happens to us, what happens to me and my colleagues is that we forget that we're talking about. We're like talking about, okay, how many hectares of land surface, and what's the economic output of this, and what are the strategies that we need to retain water or to better manage land and water resources. We should never forget that we are talking about people and their survival. It is about the planet, sure, but really it is about the people that live on the planet, because science has also shown us the planet will survive. It will evolve, something will happen, but the ones that are really at risk are humans and the way we live our life now. Concrete ways, and I will end after that. Concrete ways to advance and incorporate a human-based approach in all decisions related to the fight against climate change, biodiversity conservation, and land restoration. So we need to safeguard people's rights, and then everything else will fall into place. Then we will think of their peace we will think of their security, we will think of their economic needs, we will think of all the SDGs if we are considering the rights of the people. And so that leads me to mainstreaming one concept that seems to be forgotten in this whole conversation, that it gained some traction back, I would say, in the early 2000s, but then we kind of just forgot, which is the concept of human security. I hear there are some trends to revive it, to incorporate some health elements into it. So that might be one possibility. And the other alternative, or the other reflection that I would make is, we run the risk, when we say let's break the silos, we run the risk to put a lens of security into everything. I think we need to be very careful about that and desecuritize the agendas to, again, bring more the human, the sustainable development perspective. Perhaps we can, for example, look for ways of collaboration between traditional security institutions and humanitarian institutions and sustainable development advocates, divest military expenditures into sustainable development, for example, to promote a better sense of protection against the risk. It is a cliche, but everybody knows climate change knows no boundaries. Drought, which is the most topical emergency right now for the wrong reasons. I mean, currently 26 million people in the Horn of Africa are fighting for their daily subsistence and are at the brink of a famine due to drought in 2022, which is absolutely unacceptable. But we have drought also in the Western United States for over 20 years, in Australia in over 800 years. So these risks are planetary. So the traditional approaches will not work because everybody has a stake, everybody is at risk, so everybody needs to chip in and find solutions that are common and that are applicable for all societies. So I don't know if this is enough as an initial reflection. Probably what I would end is with Einstein's very old quote, which I think applies to, and being nuclear, I think it's also very, very telling. It applies to everything that we do, which is we cannot solve problems with the same mindset, with the same thinking that we used when we created them. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. And this is a perfect setting for our discussion that follows, but you have so many important messages in your presentation, and I don't want to follow them, but I really agree with you that we should probably have the concept of human security to be much more prominently featured in all of our work and our discussions, in particular at the multilateral level. But domestically as well. Fantastic. Now I'm going to move to Roy Trivedi, and who dedicated part of your life working on development issues, but also most recently you worked with Timor-Leste on their to enable them to support the country's ratification of the CTBT. And the question I have for you, first, what were the roadblocks to it? And why this young nation felt strongly about the ratification of the treaty and how it contributed to the sustainable development? Please.
Thanks very much, Miriam, and great to be here on this amazing panel as well. Let me start, before I answer your questions, to just thank Executive Secretary Robert Floyd and all of the team at CTBTO for organizing this event. For me, it's my first time to visit CTBT and CTBTO and to attend a science and diplomacy symposium like this. And it's been fascinating, actually, just learning a lot about this link between science, diplomacy, the issues that Miriam just spoke about, disarmament, development, and so on. I was in touch with Jose, actually, who's also on this panel, about a year and a bit ago. And I received this call. I was, at the time, the resident coordinator for Timor-Leste. And I received a call from Jose saying, look, we need your help with something. So I was, it was a little bit a call out of the blue. And when I received that call, Jose explained to me, we're in the 25th year of the CTBT, and we want to try and get as many signatories and ratifications as possible to be able to get this treaty into operation. And we need somebody on the ground who can follow up discussions. We would like to know who we should be talking to in the Timor-Leste government and so on. So I was able to provide some advice and support, and that was a year ago, and I'm thrilled to be here 1 year later with Timor having ratified this convention and also making sure that now we're talking about the next stages of the development, including the National Data Center, which hopefully will be set up. So I want to start by just very quickly saying, I want to build on the things that Miriam already spoke about. The common consensus in development now is that without peace, you can't have development. Equally, without development, you can't have peace. These things are intrinsically linked to each other. Okay, Miriam spoke about some of the major crises that the world is facing. And one of the things that often gets forgotten in that is that there are currently 40 conflicts going on across the world. Of course, the one that we hear most about is the Ukraine crisis. But one of the things that is compounding the biodiversity crisis, the development crisis, the economic crisis is also these 40 conflicts that are stopping people in different countries, cross borders, etc., from collaborating. So it's a really important point. Second thing, you asked specifically about why is Timor so committed to this, to the CTBT. And the background to this is Timor's history that gives you a very good sense of why this small country is extremely committed to the CTBT. Of course, Timor has no nuclear weapons, but the history of Timor, in a nutshell, is that in 1975, when Timor became independent, 11 days after it became independent, we had the invasion from Indonesia into Timor-Leste, and with the complicity of many other countries around the world. Timor is a half-island state, at the moment with 1.3 million people. During that period, from 75 until 1999, when the referendum was held, and 2002, when Timor regained its independence, approximately 300,000 people were killed. There were lots of people displaced and so on. Last night, all of us walked out of these premises and we saw the protests just at the bottom of the stairs from the Iranian protest group. And I think many of us probably felt a little bit uncomfortable knowing that there is, of course, we know there's human rights issues in the country and so on. And we probably felt uncomfortable. I was walking out with President Babo and Mariano, my Timorese colleagues, and they said to me, you know what, it is incredible to think that only 30 years ago, after the Santa Cruz massacre in 1990s, we were doing the same thing as these people. We were protesting outside UN buildings. So the links between human rights, development, peace, and security, exactly as were pointed out, are intrinsic. It's one of the reasons why Timor-Leste feels so strongly about supporting multilateralism. It's one of the reasons why Timor-Leste was a sponsor of SDG 16, which is really around peace and security. It was one of the first states that committed to that, and so on. Other reasons why Timor is committed is because also we are part of the Pacific as well as part of the ASEAN group. And of course, many of the nuclear tests some of the nuclear tests have been done in the Pacific. So Timor feels strongly about this issue because of that. So strong commitment to multilateralism, human rights, SDGs, and particularly SDG 16. You asked about some of the roadblocks, and very quickly I'll say, you know, for a young country and a country which is literally 20 years old, regained its independence for 20 years this year. Okay, it's less than the treaty. Actually, the treaty is now 25. Timor is 20 years regained independence. There are many, many priorities. Priorities from food, from water, access to education, good quality health services, basic services across the board. And so no matter how strongly committed a government or a people are to the CTBT, it's very difficult for them to find time to actually do all the things to ratify a convention. And so part of it is to do with capacity, part of it is to do with lots of priorities, etc., which stops, you know, often governments ratifying. But the importance of the outreach from Jose and of course the executive secretary of CTBTO has been very important. And I hope that in my own way, in a small way, being on the ground, being able to advise and follow up things, discussions that were held internationally to say, oh, how is the ratification process going in Parliament? What can we do now as the next step to prepare people and to get fully understanding, public understanding of these issues is very important. So I'm really pleased that we are in a better place in Timor-Leste, but of course, my message to every country, including especially the Annex II countries and others, is this is in everybody's interest. What we're talking about is a public good, and it's about how do you make public goods available to every citizen of the planet. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. And congratulations to CTBTO and to Timor-Leste for making it happen. And thank you for all your work. I want to pass the microphone next to Jose, who actually worked also with Roy on that, but also works on outreach to other countries that are not yet members of the CTBT, and to speak about some of this work and what are the benefits of joining the treaty. But before to do that, I want to ask panelists, to remind and be cognizant of the time, because we have only half an hour, but we have still 4 speakers, and hopefully we'll also have some time for Q&A. So I would be very grateful if you brief in your remarks.
Absolutely. Is this working? It's on?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm very honored to be on this panel with these colleagues and to see this group before me. It's my honor to be the representative of the CTBTO at United Nations headquarters. We opened that office a little over 5 years ago, and I've been there. Some of you have visited me there. I'm looking at them now. Some will soon visit me, and I hope as many as you are always welcome. Let me tell you a little bit about the work that I do there and why it's such a privileged place. We are now in Vienna. In another life, I had some activity here, but there's a big difference. This is CTBTO headquarters, okay? And many of the delegates here are very familiar with the work of our organization. Whereas in New York, it's a bit different, okay? But there's an advantage. All countries are there. I don't know what country you are from, but you have a representative there, and that's a great advantage because there are many countries, many delegations who have never, because it's just too much. It's just too much. Roy will confirm this. So my job has been to promote the work of our organization and to promote the treaty. Now, there's a comparative advantage. When I would go and meet with the ambassadors, the first thing I did was I made a list. I don't touch the Annex II, but there was a group of countries, roughly about 20, that are not Annex II, but had not signed or ratified the treaty. So I started to visit the ambassadors and talk to them about what we do. And some of them had signed as soon as the treaty opened for signature 20 years before, okay? Some had not even signed. And I looked at them, I said, most of these are developing countries. I think it would be in their interest to know a little more about what we do. And so I started to approach them and speak to them about the treaty, and they all agreed it was very important, and of course it's important to contribute to global peace and security. And, but then I spoke to them about something else. I said, you know, please, you signed the treaty, please ratify. Or if you haven't signed, you have to sign. But there's something else, okay? You come from a developing country, right? So do I. Let me speak to you about something. And they love this. I said, the treaty and its verification system was developed to detect nuclear tests, okay? But there's an added component here, okay? Have you ever heard of the civil and scientific applications of the treaty, of the mechanism? They said, no. Let me explain it to you. This system allows us to 24/7, and in this global network of over 300 stations around the world, to detect its early warning for earthquakes, for tsunamis, for volcanic eruptions, volcanic ash, global warming, etc. Does it sound familiar? I come from a developing country. We have all of these issues. I'm interested in this, okay? And to have access to this, it's at your service. You have to join, you have to sign, you have to ratify, you have to be involved, and we can help you. And so this attracted a lot of attention when I spoke to Roy. He said, yes, I think we can work with them, and we have, as you know, it's been repeated many times here, thank God, that just in this year alone, through the leadership of the Executive Secretary, we have had 6 new ratifications and counting. Okay, so this is wonderful. This is wonderful. And I just want to close with this. You know, we've had signatures, we've had ratifiers, and just yesterday, I had a very wonderful experience. We met with our colleagues from Timor-Leste, and this closed the circle. We sat down to help them request a national data center, which is going to bring them closer to this. And we're going to do this with all the countries that ask us, because that's what we're there for. You know, so it comes, you know, it closes the circle. We're there. This is what it's all about. It's about not only signing and ratifying, but the training, the technology, all of this. It's a practical treaty that is in all our interests. So I'm very happy to be a part of it, a small part of it, but I hope effective. And I ask all of you to please help us, because we still have more work to do. We have to get as many countries as possible, all on board, and you can help us in that. So it's my privilege to be a part of this, and thank you for inviting and sharing this story, which I love to share, because I think it's a good one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. And it's a perfect segue to our next speaker, Pierre, who actually works at the International Data Center, and who could now maybe provide us some of the concrete examples how the work of the CTBTO and its technical division contributes to some of the sustainable development goals and development overall. Please.
Thank you very much. So, distinguished panelists, distinguished participants, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And so, as mentioned, I will try to walk you through a few concrete examples of scientific applications that are possible with the IMS data and the IDC products. So let me first start with giving you a bit of background on the technologies. So the verification technologies of the International Monitoring System and the data technologies and product of the International Data Center indeed have the potential to offer, in addition to nuclear verification monitoring, many civil and scientific applications which could contribute to sustainable development and human welfare. Have you heard this week, civil and scientific applications are possible additional benefits of the treaty, which is made available to state signatories. And indeed, these applications are for peaceful purposes. And it's opened also the space for scientific purposes. So the Preparatory Commission has defined a number of procedures for data sharing, and beyond the main category, which is obviously to authorize users who are designated by state signatories to use IMS data for an IDC product for nuclear explosion monitoring. The PrepCom also agreed to provide data for 2 civil applications, which are tsunami warning that we've heard a little bit today already, and radiological and nuclear emergencies. Beyond this, there's also an agreement from PrepCom that gave permission to the PTS to share IMS data for scientific application, and I will dwell into this a little bit more today. So for this last application, there is a separate mechanism that has been put in place, which is very important for the scientific community, which is the Virtual Data Exploitation Center, or the VDEC. And for this, with this VDEC, you can easily gain access to the IMS data and IDC product at no cost and for a duration of 2 years. And it allows the scientists to carry out their research using data of the IMS. So concretely, how does IMS data and IDC product contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals? So here I will use a couple of examples and also VDEC project to illustrate this. So the first example I want to use today, I want to mention today, is related to reducing risk from natural or anthropogenic disasters, which is essential for good health and well-being, the third SDG. So there is a vast potential of our IMS data could be used for disaster risk mitigation. Tsunami warning already mentioned, for which CTBT data are being forwarded in real time to tsunami warning centers across the world, and these data are being utilized by the centers to alert population of the tsunami risk. IMS data are also being used to assist disaster management in various regions regarding potential damaging earthquakes. We should not forget that half of the national data centers are located in national seismological centers, which means that these centers are making use of IMS data for monitoring earthquake in their regions of interest. Another example was already mentioned this week with the Tohoku earthquake and the subsequent tsunami that occurred in March 2011 offshore Japan. This event damaged the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and this accident released radioactivity in the atmosphere for a long period of time, for several months, and this radioactive activity was observed by the IMS radionuclide network in the Northern Hemisphere. So the list of applications goes on, and scientists are still today discovering new applications of IMS data. For instance, data picked up by IMS stations support researchers into studying iceberg, movement of glaciers, hurricanes or tornadoes, landslides, avalanches, seasonal and yearly variations of specific radionuclide, or ocean processes. So, as we've heard, this helps scientists better understand climate change, which contribute to the SDG 13. Another application related to SDG 14 on marine life, with the study of whale migration patterns, which is made possible by the IMS hydroacoustic network. So today, my intention is not to give you a catalog of applications because there's too many. So I would just like to conclude and invite you to participate in the CTBT Science and Technology Conference, SNT 2023, which will take place in Vienna next year in June, but also worldwide online. At this conference, we'll be discussing usage of IMS data and IDC product for such applications. And here you will have the opportunity to witness firsthand what the CTBT scientific community has been working on scientific applications, but also the latest innovation on the use of IMS data and IDC products. So fostering innovation being another SDG, SDG 9. And let me give you one last example, which will be highlighted at the conference at SNT 2023, which is the Hunga Apai volcano that erupted in January. I think you have well seen all of these features online. And this is the most powerful eruption in over 100 years since the 1883 Krakatoa eruption in Indonesia. Scientists from around the world will present their work in Vienna at the conference, and it will show the usage of IMS data for these important activities. It's a work that is essential for preparing for the next eruptions, but also for mitigating disaster risks. So with this, I want to thank you. I hope I will have convinced you a little bit further of the usefulness of IMS data for civil and scientific applications and for how they contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ferik. And I just want to maybe highlight something that you've said about the upcoming Science and Technology Symposium a conference that will take place here in Vienna in June. I think this is an amazing event for those who are interested in seeing how these various data and technology is being used, are being used for various applications. But a word of warning for everyone, those of you who are policy wonks, maybe the first day, that the rest of the discussion is like very scientific. There's so many scientists that are working on this data, so you need a little bit of a scientific brain to at least to understand what some of these discussions are about. But nonetheless, parts of it are extremely, extremely interesting, and the variety of applications and use of this data is just endless. So encourage everyone who is interested to learn more to attend that conference. Well, now we're moving to hear from our next generation CTBT advocates. And you've been involved in this work for quite some time, so you're familiar with the work of the organization and the treaty. But I want to hear from you about your vision about the sustainable future, and also about how this linkage between the CTBT and the Sustainable Development Goals could be promoted further. And that's always great to hear some new voices and learn from the, sometimes people say next generation. I prefer now generation. You're all already working in this field. So it's kind of an artificial division, next generation. It's the now generation. But I'd be very eager to hear what you say. Amina, why don't we start with you?
Is it working? Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Elena, for your question, and thank you for moderating this session today. It's my pleasure. I'm so grateful for this opportunity that you're letting next or now generation advocates speak their minds freely and finally feel included in such essential to tackle subjects. So being a part of the CTBT or CYG fellowship introduced me to the CTBTO's structure, operation, and its solid vision. I believe that disarmament and non-proliferation efforts, in particular the CTBT, is not only correlated with the SDGs, it is vital for achieving the SDGs, as will McKenna talk about that later. Nuclear testing over the past 30 years, though, has been predominantly discussed and approached as a technical and security problem to be handled only by a cadre of experts. See, the disconnection between the technical knowledge and the social awareness over nuclear testing is obvious and in some cases is worrisome. So youth who have actually participated in the CTBTO previous events have often pointed out that nuclear discussions only take place in closed-door settings without the involvement of the next or now generation or the future generations. With this in mind, I would put the focus on youth, because youth is a vital force to foster social changes and to develop like a more equitable, sustainable, and a peaceful global society. A report of the United Nations Population Fund states that there are more young people between the ages of 10 and 24 today than at any other time in human history. And this new generation is not only significant in number, it is also socially engaged and politically mobilized. So programs like the CTBTO Research Fellowship and the CTBTO Mentoring Program will have a huge impact on the future generation. And I can put all of this in few words. Youth are the next decision makers. Knowledge is valuable, and passing that knowledge is power. I will give the floor now to Makena to talk more about the SDGs and the CTBT relation. Thank you.
Thank you, Amina. Is it working?
It's working. Wow, that was so amazing, Amina. If this was a competition, then I would be sweating right now. Your points were amazing. So with that said, I'll dive straight into my answer. Thank you so much, Elena, for your question. And thank you, Amina, for the important messages that you've just shared. 30 years of like having a discussion kind of brings to the table what Dr. Floyd was trying to say, that, you know, it's about time we take action, because we can't keep on having the same discussion over and over and over again. 30 years has been a long time, so I think it's about time that the actions that, you know, will lead to the implementation of disarmament took place. And so it is such a privilege to join the dialogue today, Disarmament for Development. And as Amina's mentioned, I wish to give you several points describing the CTBT's role in the nexus between the SDGs, the CTBT's role, I'm so sorry about that. I'd like to give you several points describing the CTBT's role in the nexus between the SDGs and disarmament, and ways to further promote it. So yeah, first and foremost, I see the treaty as a catalyst of peace and justice, which is practically SDG 16. The CTBT advances disarmament for development through its core mandate, putting an end to nuclear testing. It also promotes education, trainings, research, and capacity building activities, such as the SDS, you know, what we are having right now, and the SMT, which will be upcoming. And through such activities, it creates empowerment, like empowered communities, which is a catalyst for development. Secondly, by banning nuclear testing everywhere, the treaty also prevents the global community from the environmental crisis, contributing to SDG 13 on climate action, SDG 14 on life below water, and SDG 15 on life on land. As we all know, environmental crisis, specifically climate change, is one of the most pressing global problems, and the next generation plays a crucial role in finding a solution. As one of my fellow panelists has already mentioned, SDGs 13, 14, and 15 are also impacted by the IMS data, in such that data coming from the hydroacoustic monitoring stations and the seismic stations can be used to, you know, support research on whale migration patterns and population, improving weather prediction, and early warnings for tsunamis and earthquakes. Yeah. So additionally, the CTBTO itself pushes for the SDG by providing equal opportunities and having a diverse work environment. I think we've all seen that. And so, yeah, that goes to tick off SDG 5 and SDG 10, which is gender equality and reduced inequalities of the list. So yeah, CTBTO is really doing a great job. And for my last point, I would like to stop a bit and give you a personal experience. When I joined the CYG in 2019, the intergenerational dialogue was merely a discussion. And now, look at us now, you know, practical steps are being taken to make a reality what was once a discussion. So the same approach can be applied to disarmament. We need to be relentless and keep up with efforts to promote and raise awareness of the multiple advantages that disarmament brings and of the regrettable cost to be paid if we fail to implement it. Honestly, I'm not that eager to face the regrettable cost that will be paid. So I think it's good if we all join hands and, promote disarmament so that, because it's for the planet, it's for the people, it will help everyone. Yeah, and efforts to promote disarmament include building partnerships and identifying collaboration avenues. Here, CTBT again plays a vital role as it continues to create space for sustainable partnerships, or in other words, SDG 17. And yeah, that would be the last point, adding to my answer to your question, Elena. But before I give the floor back to you, allow me to echo words of Saba Korosi, President of the UN General Assembly, who called to trade apathy for action during the opening session of the Science Diplomacy Symposium. That was on Tuesday, yeah. So yeah, trade apathy for action. Trade apathy for action, trade like our lack of concern, our lack of interest for action, like let's take action. It's either now or now, yeah. And yeah, disarmament for development is more urgent than ever before, and actions to accelerate its implementation should be made a priority. Yeah, thank you.
I think that they're all fantastic messages and suggestions. I'm so grateful for you to actually do that work and connecting some of the benefits and contributions to the sustainable goals, but also important messages as like not doing that will have a regrettable consequences and costs for us. So I know that there are in the audience, there are some countries, the representatives who are considering joining the CTBT in the future. And I hope they're taking very good notes about some of the benefits and the connection with the development that we've been discussed today. You are all fantastic messages and examples, but we still have several minutes before we have to end the panel, and I want to make sure that our audience has an opportunity to either comment or ask questions. Please introduce yourself. Sorry, I'm kind of sitting behind that structure, but I do see everyone. It's transparent.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Hada. I'm from the youth group. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is missing regarding why some developing countries did not ratify yet? And what can be done to close this gap? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone would like to tackle that question? Yeah, Jose? I thought that you would probably be. I'll give you the floor next. There was works
Okay.
now.
All right. That's a great question. And as I look around the room, I think many of us are from developing countries. I tried to address it in my brief intervention. I tried to be brief. It could be a capacity issue, okay? bear in mind that this treaty was open for signature now 26 years ago. As Roy was reminding us, some countries had not even come into existence when this happened. So it could be a capacity issue. And bear in mind, some time has passed since the treaty was open for signature. There are new issues. There are new issues. And many of these developing countries, I said they are all in New York, have small missions, small representations, and the issues pile on, okay? So perhaps the CTBT sort of got put on the back burner. And that's where I humbly believe that our presence in New York and obviously through Vienna, through our headquarters, has helped to bring it back to the discussion and say, look, this treaty, you signed it a long time ago. You need to ratify it. It would be good for everyone. It's a win-win situation. We can help you. And look at all the benefits. Look at all the, I tried to explain some of these benefits, right? And this is where we have partnered wonderfully with the United Nations, who are on the ground, who know everyone there, and who are able to convey our message. So I think that's a response to your question. Why? It hasn't been a lack of interest. It's certainly not political. Who could not agree with this? Especially, everyone is on board on that. But we have, and that's what we've tried to do, to update the discussion and to bring them. And this is a clear example of how we are doing that. And we've done it, we're doing it, and we will continue to do it, to engage with developing countries, to help us bring this treaty into force, to make it as universal as possible. It's already a very, very universal treaty. Most of the countries around the world have signed it. Most of them developing countries. So, and again, I appeal to all of you here, if you can help us with those countries that still haven't come on board, tell them this is a good thing. You have to join. So, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Jose. We'll take one more question from over there, and I think that with that, we'll have to conclude.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Director and the team for the presentation. My name is Dennis Dumo. I'm from South Sudan, a delegate from South Sudan. And you know, South Sudan is not yet a member of the Commission, and we hope that soon South Sudan will be part of their team. I have a question to the representative from Trimolis. You have elaborated, going to the background of the commitment your country has been taking towards the Commission. And, that reminds me also of 5 years ago of your president visited South Sudan, and the center of the discussion was about sustainable development. And now we're talking about, South Sudan soon maybe going to be the member of this body. My question is that what are the key giveaway lesson that a country like South Sudan and the rest who are not part of this can be able to learn from the experience that you have been going through? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thanks for the question. It's a fantastic question, and so pleased to hear about South Sudan's interest in ratification, joining the CTBTO fully. Look, from the Timorese example, I think that there are several things. Colleagues, I think, across the panel this morning have alluded to some of these. I think one issue is definitely the way in which you, by signing and ratifying this treaty, you also get access to all of these other goods, including the National Data Center, the information that is provided from that, etc. What that does is enable you to be better prepared for your country's development. Okay, we spoke specifically about tsunami warnings, we spoke about earthquake warnings, the way in which this scientific data is also being used to look at migration patterns of things like whales and so on, but even animals, other animals, etc. There are a whole series of applications. Second big thing for Timor-Leste at the moment is huge interest in the education sphere. Literally, every university is interested to get up-to-date information, use the type of technology and the type of tools that CTBTO is promoting, etc. And that enables huge new advances to be made, scientific advances that can improve the quality of life of people in your country. So I think there are really fantastic opportunities, and that's why I think this is something that every country should fully support. Thank you.
Thank you. And then just probably reiterate some of your earlier message, but it's also the multilateralism is extremely important, and the being part of the multilateral international system is extremely important. As somebody said, I don't remember from which country, is that if we want to have peace and security, we need to be part of that international legal and institutional framework. They do provide us for the security and for ability to take benefits from these institutions, but also to help the country to have its own peaceful development. Okay, these are extremely important messages. And I think we had a fantastic discussion. You are all amazing with all the different points, and I'm sure that this will be something that needs to be continued. But we have to end our session, unfortunately, because we're already a little bit over the time. But I want all of you to join me and thank our fantastic panelists today for their great comments and suggestions. Thank you. And also thank the Preparatory Commission and those who worked on the program of this symposium to put this important topic of disarmament and development on the agenda. Big kudos to you all. Thank you so much.
We have an announcement. Miss Hala Alice and Miss Salva Al-Salhi, please proceed to the organizers. Once Miss Hala Alice and Miss Ala Salih, please proceed to the organizers. Miss Salva Al-Salhi, please proceed to the organizers.
Not comfortable? Test, test, test. Test. Test.
We are waiting for everyone to come back from the coffee break, but without further ado, I suggest we start the session. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, guests, and of course my favorite CTBT youth group members, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you today to this session on the future of the CTBT. This session is a unique opportunity for us to speak about what we want to see as the future for this treaty, what we want to see also as the future for the world, together with a multidimensional panel of experts and also with the next generation. My name is Maria Chipurna, and I'm External Relations Officer at the CTBTO. I'm also the coordinator of the organization's flagship youth outreach program, which brings together over 1,200 experts working in the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation field from the entire globe. This session is being live streamed, so I would like you also to welcome our online audience joining us today. And please communicate, please convey your ideas to us, both during the panel discussion and also on social media, using the hashtag SDS3. But before I give the floor to the first speaker, let me actually share with you a short story. When preparing for this session, I was speaking to one of the panelists here with us today, who I admire very much, who is actually one of the leading experts on climate change issues. And what he told me, I feel, is actually the gist of our discussion today. For many people, he said, climate change and the future we will have when climate change is happening is a copy-paste of the future that we have today, plus climate change. But the reality is much more complex than that. And I believe this also applies for the future of the CTBT. And it is definitely up to us during this panel discussion to look into those complexities and to discuss how we can counter them. How we can counter them, building partnerships, launching new initiatives, as we all know, if we want to go far, we have to go together. Of course, if we want to go fast, we can go on our own. But if we want to go far, we should be going together. This session will have two parts. The first part of it will be the panel discussion, and I'm deeply grateful to each and every one of our speakers for joining us today. And then we will have a Q&A part with the audience. And I do encourage you to ask questions, to share your comments, and also we will be getting questions from the online audience that is also watching us today. Without further ado, let me now give the floor to our first speaker, CTBT Youth Group member, Ha-Yoon Kim. Ha-Yoon, you have a fantastic profile. You are an incoming senior program officer at the Asia Society think tank in Washington, D.C., and you have also worked for the Korean Foreign Ministry. In 2021, you were selected to be part of the CTBT SINES Research Fellowship, and I have been absolutely impressed by the research you have done as part of this fellowship. What I would say you encompass through the work that you do for this treaty, what the Executive Secretary, Robert Floyd, likes to say, an example of engagement where passion meets purpose. Ha-Yoon, over to you.
Well, thank you so much for the warm introduction, Maria. Hello, hello, everybody. It's so great to be invited to the Science Diplomacy Symposium this year in person here in Vienna. It's such an honor. My name is Ha-Yoon, and I am from the Republic of Korea. Please let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude for those who made the symposium possible today, especially Dr. Floyd, amazing Maria, and Marius, for the warm invitation which allowed me to be here today. I would like to begin by recognizing that CTBTO Youth Group, which is CYG in short, has for over the years served as an amazing international platform for young professionals like myself to promote CTBT's entry into force for a world to stop nuclear testing. And to be more specific, the CTBTO Youth Group's Research Fellowship, which I was luckily a part of last year, not only gave me the opportunity to learn from the experts in the field of nuclear disarmament and nonproliferation, but also gave me the chance to mingle with and to work with aspiring professionals from all over the world. And if I may share my story of my own experience with the fellowship, I had the chance to co-author on a publication with my fellowship peers, Qiang from China and Xian from Kazakhstan. I'm pretty sure she's in the room somewhere today. And our article titled "The DPRK and the CTBT, What Could Come Next After the Moratorium" was successfully published by the Journal for Peace and Nuclear Disarmament. I believe the world that we would like to see in the future is the world where there is, first, a strong no nuclear testing norm in place, and second, CTBT in full operation with universal membership, and third, robust support from civil societies, including the youth groups that are interested in nuclear peace and security, such as CYG. With that said, I believe promoting CTBT's entry into force and its verification regime is an indispensable task that needs to be done and needs greater attention from the public. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to achieve this, the role of the youth, to materialize this important mission. I would like to close by saying that hopefully my experience with the CTBTO Youth Group and its research fellowship successfully inspires a lot of young professionals who are watching this online or who are here with me in the room to join me and embark on this journey and to be a part of this great audacious mission. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time to take action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hayun. This is truly inspiring. I think you have inspired this audience, and I'm also sure you will be going on to inspire many more young people, many more next generation experts. When preparing for this session, I have been reading quite a lot on strategic foresight. And one of the key ideas from this research was that we do not have one absolute future. We have many relative futures. And it is our joint responsibility to see how we can construct the future that we actually want. And this is precisely what the UN's leading voice on climate change, UNFCCC, has been doing through its Resilience Frontiers initiative. So please warmly welcome our next speaker, Youssef Nassef, who is a leader in the field of climate change and adaptation, director of UNFCCC's adaptation workstream, seconded diplomat from the Egyptian Foreign Service, and also a graduate of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Youssef, we are absolutely honored and excited to have you here with us today. And as the founder of the Resilience Frontiers, we would love if you could share with us some of the lessons learned from this initiative.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Hyun, for this inspiration to kick us off this morning. I was looking at the CTBTO Youth Group page, and I saw that in the top banner, it asked for people who are directing their careers to contribute to global peace and security. And let's hold that thought, because that's almost the overarching purpose for which this treaty is created. It's not testing for the sake of testing, but there is a higher order objective there. And let me now digress to the climate change context, and then we can go back to CTBT. You might have heard of the Paris Agreement, which was adopted around 7 years ago and is in force. But when the Paris Agreement was adopted, it envisioned a gradual process that had time to move on. So let's ask for voluntary pledges from countries, and every 5 years, let's see how well we're doing, and maybe if there are gaps, we can deal with them, etc. But then in 2018 and 2019, the scientists came up with reports and told us, hey, you have 10 years to transform societies, to transform economies towards a very different paradigm. And if you don't do that, whatever prosperity we are used to will start going on a downward path. Then a year passed, 2 years passed, 3 years passed, and our negotiating process continued on its merry way with incremental progress. No one really knew how to heed that call for transformation. We're not used to that in the UN. We're not used to that in multilateral negotiations. In fact, we have an international setting that is mandated to solve a global problem, not an international problem. There's a slight nuance difference there. And so even though I'm actually the longest serving substantive staff member at UNFCCC, which means that I should be very bureaucratized and not try to rock any boat. So trying to dispel that stereotype, I started thinking, okay, what does transformation mean? And the question was not transformation from where we are, but transformation towards another place. And I had the pleasure of launching this initiative, Resilience Frontiers initiative, actually in Korea, in the city of Songdo, where I gathered people from so many different disciplines, none of which were from climate change. So I had from foresight, there were foresight experts running the methodology, so we created a methodology that was a merge of several. I can share that later with you. But had people from frontier technologies, because we knew that that future world that is not just a facsimile of today plus climate change is actually a word that is created by and large by the evolution of technologies that are in an accelerated pathway today, like AI and big data and Internet of Things, new satellite technologies, etc. And so they knew what was in the pipeline, and they knew how to link different technologies together to produce something else. It's like sitting 30 years ago and being asked what is the future of the phone going to be, and being able to see that it will have a camera in it. That would have been crazy. But we had people who could see that into the future. We had people from the basic needs of humans, whether security, water, health, food, etc. We had people from the different institutional setups, finance, education, governance, even values, habitats. And so we applied this foresight methodology over a period of a week in which we sequestered these thought leaders and came up in the end with a vision for a future world consisting of 8 pathways in different areas. Some dealing with the change in values in our relationship with nature, some dealing with continuous learning. What does that look like in the future? Very different from education. Some dealing with how to deal with transboundary issues, the future of money, of economics. And so the thinking was a bit beyond what we would normally find acceptable in our usual bureaucratized setting. And the idea there was to then create pathway groups. So 8 groups are trying to find what would be the first mover actions, black swan-like events that could enable a fast transition. So dealing, for example, with multi-criteria analysis, but not to find the most effective, the most efficient, etc., but the most appropriate as a first mover. So we've had things like that in history where one event triggers a lot of events afterwards, including those that, for example, ending segregation in the US by virtue of the Rosa Parks incident, or specific, actually, movies that change people's outlook considerably towards certain things. And so we're trying to, now these groups are working, they're supported by some advisory groups, one working on methodologies to tell us how best to prioritize different actions into the future to enable that fast transition. Another one on communication, so postmodern communication tools where we have a multidisciplinary group from show business, from marketing, from nudging experts to data analytics people. So sort of the post-Cambridge Analytica world. How can communication be used for good, for achieving that better vision into the future? We have a third group working on technology also to look at what's in the pipeline. And from all of this, the result will be a series of first mover actions that would be implemented as catalysts for moving into that future. But the first step has had to be going through the foresight methodologies to rid oneself of cognitive biases, of wrong assumptions. And some of the assumptions we all have here are quite wrong. And I can give you examples of certain things that happen in the world. 1914, New York City was geared towards transforming its transport from horse-driven carriages to automobiles within 2 years. And everyone knew that was happening. And yet City Council in 1914 was discussing what to do with the problem of accumulating horse manure in the coming decades. So we are so wedded to yesterday, thinking that it is today, but it's still yesterday as we move forward. Today, look at what we're doing to protect the oceans. We're starting a plastics negotiation that started last week, mostly instigated by plastics in the ocean. And at the same time, we are in parallel littering space. But that will come later. So 10 years from now, we'll say, oops, let us find a new equivalent to SDGs to solve things in the next 15 years, whereas we're sort of oblivious to some of the things happening now. So the type of new thinking that goes into this type of initiative enables us to don new glasses and see the future as it can be. And I was telling Amina earlier that the future does not happen to us. We happen to the future. And in many cases, it can be changed by very few people. In most cases, it has been. And in parallel, there are certain things that we have in our toolbox, and you can check it out in resiliencefrontiers.org. One is existing bright lights. So there are certain initiatives, startups, policies today that are already compatible with that vision that we have. So those 8 pathways we were talking about in existence today that could be nurtured, they're quite hidden. It's not very easy to find them. It's like looking in 1979 at the landscape of personal computers and recognizing that Apple computer will become the biggest at some point in time, whereas it was one of the many small ones at that point in time. So that's a collection of like 500 different existing initiatives that we know are useful for that transition and for the steady state once we reach it. So we're very much in touch with those. And we have quite a few significant players from show business involved in this, those who specifically deal with science fiction. I mean, when you get into the foresight story, you start dealing with very interesting groups of people, whether it's those who are creative in the arts or those who are very knowledgeable of specific areas, especially technology. And then once you start removing the silos, as we were talking this morning, between all of these, you discover that they actually never interfaced with each other before. Even the advisory group on communication I was talking about, these types of people had never interacted in this way before in trying to figure out what kind of modalities would be viable in the future in terms of influence, in terms of giving the real story to people and inspiring hope. So the story here is that telling the people that a better future or the best future possible is not just possible, but it is desirable and it is necessary because the other alternative is quite bad. So how does that then link to the CTBT story? So as we start visioning into the future, or basically, let's go back to the past yet. 25 years have passed since the adoption of this treaty. And I'm sure if you had asked someone back then to visualize where it would be 25 years from then, first, they would probably have figured out that it would be in force already. And second, they would not have envisioned how impactful it would already have been, even without being in force. And not just impactful in the context of nuclear testing, but also in civilian and scientific uses, as we heard earlier. And so now, as you look into the future, what would that non-linear extrapolation be? 25 years from now. Now, some of the expectations might end up being wrong in a bad way, or some might end up being wrong in a good way. So 50 years ago, I mean, this year is the 50th anniversary of the Stockholm Declaration, the United Nations Conference on Human Environment. And we had, I think, 26 or 27 principles coming out in the declaration, and they were the representation of the international community's consensus on what should be done in the world in terms of environment. And frankly, a lot of the things we had agreed on then have not been implementing, on safeguarding the global commons, species, nature, etc. And we're repeating the same things now. So what is it that pulls us back? Even when we have a vision, when we have consensus, you go into the future and find that it hasn't happened. So it's really important to find what are the factors on the side that are pulling us back or pushing us forward. For example, in the Paris Agreement, like I said, was adopted 7 years ago, and since then, $4 trillion additional dollars have gone into fossil fuel investment. So the Paris Agreement is supposed to move you against that, but there is something pulling us in another direction. So there are some more fundamental values, some more fundamental systemic aspects in our life, actually paradigmatic, not systemic, because as you move forward into a new world, you might end up with different systems. Normally, we think we're talking about systemic change when we still assume that the food system will exist as is, but some change within it. The water systems are like that, security systems. But if we're looking at paradigm shifts, the systems might look very different and not the same as they do now. Exactly like when we look at how the phone evolved since 30 years ago. So looking at the future of CTBT, the first entry point I would see is the contribution to global peace and security. What does that mean? So as you visualize that, part of it is about testing, but there might be other parts about international relations, about economics, about equity, about human rights. There's so many other things that then when you start visualizing the future, they come into play. And one gets out of the limited assumptions of how things can continue as they are. Because the peril is that we start thinking in a linear way and not in the way the world actually really works. So let me stop here and get back to any questions that you have later. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Youssef. And as we all know, beauty is very often in the blending. And this is why we're also so deeply grateful to the climate change community for responding to this invitation and for joining us today. Our next speaker, Sue Kim, Political Affairs Officer and the leading voice in UNODA on the Youth for Disarmament initiative, which she launched in 2019, will be actually telling us about how UNODA is preparing the next generation for the future. Sue, very happy to see you here. Thank you for coming, for joining us from New York. You have an amazing multidimensional profile. You have worked in this field for more than 15 years. Most recently, you were acting director at the UN Regional Center for Peace and Disarmament in Asia and the Pacific. So the floor is yours, and we really look forward to hearing more about your Youth for Disarmament initiative.
Thank you very much, Maria, and also thank you to Ian and also Youssef for sharing the insights and inspirations, and also panelists, as well as Excellencies, former Secretary of Sri Lanka, and distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. I'm gratified for the opportunity to address the forward-looking panel discussion on the final day of Science Diplomacy Symposium. Young people under the age of 30 account for over half of the world's population, and we cannot achieve disarmament nor world peace without their proactive engagement. 7 years ago today, the UN Security Council adopted its Resolution on Youth, Peace and Security 2250, the first international policy framework that recognizes the positive role young people play in preventing and resolving conflict and building peace. Subsequently, in 2019, the UN General Assembly, through its unanimous support of its Resolution on Youth
disarmament and non-proliferation encouraged all actors to promote meaningful and inclusive participation of young people in discussions in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation. Indeed, a human-centered approach has come to disarmament, as my previous speaker, Miriam, noted in the previous panel. 73 years after the adoption of the first resolution of the UN General Assembly in 1946, which established the goal of eliminating all nuclear weapons and also other weapons adaptable to mass destruction. It is embedded in UN's DNA. Fast forward, our world faces multiple global challenges, from climate change to ensuring equitable and sustainable development for all, to rebuilding from the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yet the dangers posed by the continued existence of nuclear weapons ranks among the most urgent of those challenges. This is for one simple reason. Nuclear weapons have the potential to eliminate all life on the planet. In this ever-shifting world of what we call VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, as the lead of UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, flagship youth outreach engagement, hashtag Youth Number 4 Disarmament, Y4D, I would like to say a few words about how our agile approaches and adaptable activities are creating life-changing opportunities for young people as the leaders of tomorrow to enact change today. Guided by the 3 E's, engage, educate, and empower, the key principles of Y4D, despite the constraints posed by the global pandemic, UN Office for Disarmament Affairs has made significant inroads in reaching out to this new generation by creating and launching a dedicated digital platform for youth engagement at www.youthnumber4disarmament.org. Youth participation at formal and also informal meetings has jumped by more than 500% since the launch of Y4D in 2019. And the initiative was recognized as the best coalition building project of 2020 by the Billion Acts of Peace Award established by 14 Nobel Peace Prize winners. When VUCA is replaced by vision, understanding, clarity, and agility, crisis can become opportunity for positive change. Please allow me to share 3 examples of Y4D's recent work based on its outreach process of the 3 Ps of participation, perspectives, and partnerships. The first is participation, inspired by the objective to engage young people towards action. Y4D hosted a first of its kind training program with 10 UN youth champions, initially a 6-week training that turned into a 2-year program due to the global health emergency. This created opportunities through uncertainty and enhanced the project's goal to educate young people on general principle of disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control, D.N.A. Through the agility and adaptability of the programming and partnership with the donor country, Germany, youth champions grew in their role as youth leaders and advocates for DNA in their local communities. This leads to a second P of perspectives, inspired by our principle to educate towards innovation. Y4D provides education opportunities to youth for them to acquire the knowledge and understanding to develop their ideas. One example is Y4D's Leaders for Tomorrow DNA workshop series, made possible through generous financial contributions from the government of the Republic of Korea. Leaders for Tomorrow explored the linkages between DNA and 5 relevant topics, including development, new and emerging technologies, gender, environment, and education, and presented their innovative projects at a side event of this year's UN First Committee in New York. And the final P is partnerships. This leads to empowerment, and it takes youth towards collaboration. Y4D has worked with a variety of organizations to host and promote 3 worldwide contests, including the 75 Awards for Disarmament, the What If Spestera Video Challenge, and the Pitching Peace Music Challenge. It is a great pleasure to see Ms. Virginia Bertuzzi, who is the first prize winner of the Spestera Youth Video Challenge, also working behind the scenes of this symposium. Since 2021, in collaboration with the government of Kazakhstan,
CTBTO and Youth Fusion, Y4D has conducted the Step Up for Disarmament campaign, inviting young people to walk or run 8.29 kilometers using their sporting passion to raise awareness of the International Day Against Nuclear Tests on 29 August. So disarmament can be an intimidating field for newcomers, especially young people. By providing an array of activities, whether to tap into individuals' academic, artistic, or athletic talents, be it through a screen or in person, Y4D seeks to welcome youth of diverse backgrounds and interests to meaningfully participate and contribute to securing our common future. This inclusive approach is not only necessary but vital to achieve the ultimate objectives of DNA and for the effectiveness and sustainability of the agreements that we reach and the work that we do. In closing, I would like to reiterate the words of Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, from a message to the Science Diplomacy Symposium that it is important to look beyond our own silos and work with others to learn from each other. The beauty, as Maria says, lies in the blending of our interests and collective action, working together to build a safer, more peaceful world for all. Let us take forward today's discussions to generate new ideas and solutions as we confront the new challenges that lie ahead. Thank you for your attention, and back to you, Maria.
Thank you so very much, Sue, and thank you also for our great cooperation with Youth for Disarmament, and we very much look forward to taking this forward. Our next speaker is Andrzej Baklitsky, and I would like, Andrew, you to actually focus more on the future vision of our treaty, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. I have known Andrew for a number of years now and have always admired him. As a senior researcher at my alma mater in Moscow, the MGIMO University, and further on as a director at Peer Center, and now as a UNIDIR senior researcher, for his innovative thinking and a completely novel way of looking at things, especially at things that might be happening in the future. Andrei, over to you.
Thank you so much, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak before such a distinguished audience. And the question is already broad, the future of CTBT. Let me broaden it a little bit. I have 4 minutes, but we need always a broader questions. So the future of CTBT, CTBTO, and nuclear testing more broadly. And to answer this question, I think there are two main components. One is the legal one, and one is a normative one. So from a legal point of view, the norm, the non-testing, the CTBT and CTBTO are pretty well covered, one can say. Non-nuclear weapon states under the NPT, the majority of states in the world, are barred from nuclear testing by the virtue of being barred from producing nuclear weapons. Then the P5, under the NPT, have either signed or ratified already the CTBT. So according to Vienna Convention on Law of the Treaties and according to the customary law, they should not act against treaties principles. So that basically leaves us, and yes, Israel also has signed the CTBT, so it's also binded by that. So it leaves us only with 3 countries in the world, more or less, which is India, Pakistan, and DPRK, which are out of this legal prohibition. And universalization of CTBT and entry into force, or at least signing by the remaining 3 states, would close all legal pathways to testing. And this is a crucial goal for international community and CTBTO for the next 25 years, but it doesn't look unsurmountable. But the second normative aspect is, and in some contexts is even more important than the first one. The norm against nuclear testing is based on almost universal agreement that nuclear tests are bad for the environment, for people, that they are escalatory, that they feed the nuclear arms race. And this is actually what brought us the partial test ban treaty, then CTBT, And this, for example, caused condemnation and sanctions against India and Pakistan when they tested in '98, despite the fact that they've been party to no treaty which prohibited that. And the only country, for example, which is currently continuing nuclear testing, which done it in the 21st century, is DPRK. But the fact that it is also met with broad condemnations and heavy sanctions exemplifies difficulties associated with going against the norm. So norm against the nuclear testing is less robust than, for example, norm against non-use of nuclear weapons. But it's also a norm that has a dedicated organization that could support it, and that's CTBTO. And this is clearly something that needs to be done. Countries can withdraw from the NPT, for example. Countries can say that they will never ratify the CTBT, and countries can even unsign the treaties which they previously signed. But they would be far less likely to do so if there is a strong norm against nuclear testing. If it's not a simple decision of national adherence or not adherence to the treaty, which is, individual state can decide one way or the other, but if it's a broad international norm, it's much harder to go against it. So how can we support this norm of non-testing? Well, one way would be extending the period without nuclear tests. Unfortunately, now it only runs for 5 years. The last test we had was 2017. But the longer it goes, the stronger this norm becomes. And this is why engaging with DPRK is very important, not only to persuade it to join the treaty, not only to enhance the treaty ratification and entry into force, but keeping this momentum of not having nuclear tests. It also can be supported by engaging the populations, expert communities, and politicians around the world, but specifically in Annex II states. Explaining them the downside of testing, explaining it to their countries, to their populations, which again, the broader is the part of the world which says that nuclear weapons tests are bad, the stronger the norm. And it is critical to address and educate the younger generation. It was said a lot of time here, but norms are developed in long term. So sustaining and strengthening the norm of non-testing in the next 25 years, as well as the future of CTBT, will fall on the shoulders of people who are today in this room. And the broader this engagement will be, the more people will have, including Annex II states, the stronger this norm will be, and by virtue of being the mainstream, it will help us also bring CTBT into force and make sure that nuclear testing has ended, well, preferably forever. Thank you.
Andrei, thank you very much for sharing this very positive vision for the future of the treaty. As an arms control expert, I know that you have a very realistic view of things, so it's great to hear this from you. And I'm also delighted that the CTBT Executive Secretary, Rob Floyd, has been able to join us for this session to hear those ideas and suggestions. So my question now is to Jeremy Faust, because you are our CTBT youth group member, and I would love to hear from you whether you, as the next generation, actually agree with what Andrei has been saying. And Jeremy, thank you for all the work you have been doing for us as the US coordinator of the CTBT youth group. You also have a very busy portfolio back at home in New York, working as an attaché with the Holy See Permanent Observer Mission. So please tell us whether you would agree with what Andrei has been saying, and what is your vision for the CTBT at 50?
Sure. Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you for the kind introduction, and I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak on such a distinguished panel. I certainly agree with Andrei, and I think the normative aspects of the treaty and strengthening them is very important, and I think there are three ways which we can work toward to strengthening the normative aspects. One is taking a more human-centric approach, similar to what Miriam said on the last panel. The second is adapting new technologies to verifying the ban on nuclear testing. And then a third is having the CTBTO and supporting states ready to capitalize on the current crises we face today. So regarding a human-centric approach, in the last decade, we've seen much more increased attention to the humanitarian and environmental consequences of nuclear testing. And I think because of the success of the CTBT so far, despite a lack of entry into force, we kind of tend to think of nuclear testing as mostly a historical issue. But for many of the communities affected by it, it's still a present reality, whether it's in Kazakhstan or the Marshall Islands, French Polynesia, or Kiribati. There's still individuals that suffer, and it hampers development as well. So I think one way to adapt the CTBT to this reality is to further explore the complementarity between it and the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Ambassador Monakane discussed this on Tuesday, the ambassador of South Africa. And I think there are two ways the CTBT this complementarity can be explored. One is verification, and the second is kind of documentation. So on verification, I think in the future, maybe not tomorrow, but going forward, it makes sense to have the CTBTO lend its international monitoring system to the states parties of the TPNW to verify that treaty's ban on nuclear testing. The TPNW is still quite controversial, but so that's probably a little ways away. But I think one area the CTBT can act now in exploring this complementarity is by using its convening power, like at this symposium, like the science and technology conferences. I think the CTBTO can convene experts that can research and document the historical effects of nuclear testing. And I think that falls well within the scope of the treaty to facilitate such research. And then moving on to my second point about new technologies. The IMS is a very successful system, but it is aging. It's based on 1990s technology. Since the treaty was adopted, we've seen great advances in various other technologies where if we were to develop a verification system from scratch, we might want to rely on these technologies. So one such example would be satellite imagery, which has greatly increased in quality and declined in cost. So finding ways to adapt such new technologies to test site monitoring would be very helpful, especially in verifying against very low yield testing. I think adapting such new technologies would really help ratification prospects in the United States, a topic on which I wrote with my colleague Artyom Kvartalnov for the CYG CNS Research Fellowship. And so I think that's another area that the CTBTO should explore within its power. And then the third comment I wanted to make is just that the CTBTO should stand ready to respond to crises to advance entry into force. The current landscape for arms control is quite bleak, and the recent ratifications of the CTBT are a rare bright spot in that landscape. But going forward in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, crises we currently face, such as the war in Ukraine, will eventually subside. And when it comes time to reinvigorate arms control between the US and Russia, perhaps working towards CTBT ratification in the United States offers a pathway to reinvigorating that. And then some other areas that the CTBTO should focus on, current roadblocks, but the current roadblocks can be tomorrow's opportunities, are achieving the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, advancing prospects of a Middle East nuclear weapon-free zone, and finally, advancing arms control towards a trilateral dimension involving the US, Russia, and China. And I think promoting CTBT ratification among China and the United States could be a first step towards more formalized arms control architecture between those states. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I would quote you, today's roadblocks can actually be the opportunities of tomorrow. Thank you for those excellent ideas. We have a few minutes left before the end of this discussion, and I would like to open the floor to questions from the audience because I see already a lot of hands coming up. So please, may I ask you to keep your questions or comments relatively short, present yourself so we know who is asking them, and also indicate if they are addressed to one specific speaker or to the entire panel of speakers. Let me start with Aline, you go first, then you are followed by your colleague sitting next to you, and then we will take also the two gentlemen over there to make sure even the Q&A part is gender balanced.
Nice, thank you so much. So I'm part of the youth group, and my question is, how can we develop scenarios for the future? How can we make it happen? Thank you.
Thank you, Aline.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hada. I'm from the youth group too. So my question is, why isn't there any initiative for a worldwide initiative to add more awareness to nuclear testing in school curriculum for the next generation's leaders? Thank you.
Thank you. This is an absolutely excellent question. Let us take two more questions here. I see Chris and I see another colleague over there, and then I'll open up the floor.
Hello, everyone. Christopher Cruz, Salvadoran American member of the CYG. And my question is to my two CYG friends up on the stage. What experiences within the youth group circumvented your expectations? And thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, my name is Omar, and thank you for this insight we have today received. I would like to address my question to Mr. Nassif. I would like to know how you assess the current situation in the MENA region in terms of the nuclear situation, and are there any activities that might be coming up our way? And also would like to know how you assess the ecological situation in the MENA region. Do you think there will be a positive effect in the next years?
Could you please present yourself?
My name is Omar. I'm from Austria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would now like to open those questions to the panel, and let us start first with our two CYGs because they got a very exciting, very specific question, and then we will go to the three other questions.
Sure, I can start. So I think what circumvented my expectations might have been learning just how diverse a field the arms control community is, especially being in the CTBTO context. I come from more of a policy background, and the policy community is not the most diverse. And then you come here to a conference like this, and you meet people from all over the world, but you also meet people from different backgrounds, whether they be seismologists or physicists or other technical backgrounds that you don't usually interact with much at the UN. And I think addressing the world's future problems and current problems, like climate change, requires a lot of interdisciplinary cooperation. And so seeing the CTBTO kind of foster such interdisciplinary engagement is really something that's great to see.
And on top of what Jeremy said, for me, I guess, speaking from my experience, one of the key findings that I've gone through this fellowship is the fact that is everybody in this room and who are watching this online, that there are people actually who are trying really hard for the CTBT's entry into force. Because when I was from the outside world, to me it seemed as if it was so abstract, and it seems like it's ongoing, but it's really not ongoing. You don't really see the concrete progress. But after working as a CYG research fellow, it really gave me the opportunity to learn from the experts in the field and to engage with fellowship peers to actually publish and to do research and to learn more about the areas that deserves greater attention. And I learned to realize that it is very important that the role of the youth is to materialize this great mission to end nuclear testing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hayun. Let me now open the floor to our other three panelists. We have had questions about developing future scenarios, about developing curricula at schools, covering the CTBT, and also Youssef got a very specific question for him. So could I ask Youssef to take the questions he would like to tackle?
Yes, of course. So first on future scenarios, maybe I can tackle this one. The modality we've used, I think, in trying to visualize a future sustainable world under the Resilience Frontiers Initiative used a merger of two different methodologies. One is called Futures Literacy from UNESCO, and the other was a moonshot approach that's applied by many other entities. And the idea here is, in order to start such an activity, typically it would take a week for people to come together. The first 2 days is usually an adjustment of people's mental approach towards the future, and that's where the UNESCO methodology works. So you go through exercises that then enable us at the end of the first 2 days to go through what they call a collective intelligence process. So there's always each one building on the next, and it doesn't matter if they come from different different areas of expertise or experiences. And it really works like magic in trying to look at the future in ways that are very different from a random conversation that's not grounded in an objective assessment. And then you go into the second half, which is more like a backcasting exercise. So here's what makes sense to us as a good future, and you need to know why, not just that it would be nice if, you know, all the people loved each other. Then you ask why. Why would it be nice? And so every step is challenged, and then you go back from there, having been armed with the mental aptitude over the exercise in the first 2 days to do that. But I think very important is to have it as multidisciplinary as possible. So no point in bringing people who only work on CTBT to decide or to visualize the future of CTBT. It has to also include everyone else that's a beneficiary from this, you know, especially the youth, I must say, who have been our main clients in this visioning process, because it is, the future is the world of the youth today. And I found it much easier to incorporate the youth in these paradigm shifting discussion and sort of norm destroying ones, where maybe the non-youth component of our society would be less amenable to visualizing something that departs massively from what we believe should be a given as we move forward. So there are very well-established methodologies and exercises for doing this. I can share this with CTBTO if you desire to do an exercise like that with the youth. I think it's quite worthwhile. It's been applied in many areas. I've also been involved with partner institutions in trying to set up a PhD program on foresight. So it's gaining a lot of ground. Now on the MENA region, I can't say much about the situation with the nuclear situation there, but I can tell you that throughout my life I've probably lived through around 7 military conflicts. Fortunately, the last one was quite a while back, and so I'm very optimistic as to the state of peace in the Middle East at the moment, and hope that doesn't change. From the ecological perspective, climate change in particular, we've had our decision-making body or negotiations held this year in a MENA country, and next year it will be in a MENA country as well. So from Egypt to the UAE. And climate change-wise, it's very interesting, because after I can't remember after which global recession we had, countries started realizing the importance of diversifying their energy mix, and including a foray into nuclear energy in the case of Egypt as well. But on the other hand, it's very clear that solar energy is the obvious eventual solution for energy in the region, both because of the existence of a high level of what we call in-solar amount of solar energy coming in that area, but also because of the ability to extract silicon from the sand that is plentiful there, and then producing the wafers that constitute solar cells and then solar panels. But there's still this pullback from the fear of losing energy independence and wanting to maintain diversity in energy production. On the other hand, you have countries that are dependent on the production and export of oil, and then we have in environmental agreements this whole notion of just transition. So how do they deal with their ecological objectives without sacrificing their economic objectives, or at least finding a soft landing? So it's a pretty complicated landscape on how to proceed. In terms of vulnerability, the region, I think, obviously has a fear of drought, and we heard a lot from Miriam about this this morning, drought and land degradation, and as well sea level rise. So these are areas which are on the minds of policymakers in most of the Middle Eastern countries as we move forward, and are driving a lot of their positions in the multilateral environmental agreements that deal with ecological decline. We're trying to do a lot of this foresight stuff also in the context of that region, and as we move forward, Dubai has significant capacity in looking at the future and willingness, looking at the future and foresight and transformation. So I think in our next session of the Conference of the Parties to the Climate Change Convention, that element of transformation will become very prominent. And I think we're on the cusp of a change in the way of thinking towards the more visionary and futuristic aspect to this, transforming whether and how we deal with ecological crisis or in terms of looking at the future of energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Youssef. The same questions go to Sue and Andre, and please keep your answers to 1 minute, because otherwise we'll be running out of time for this panel. Thank you.
Yeah, just with regard to your question on the why don't you see like CTBT, maybe like curricula in the classrooms? Just to give a short answer, it's because it's really hard to penetrate into the already set curriculum that's defined by the Ministry of Education. Then this is the reason why in Y4D we come up with the creative ways, like such as these 3 contests that I mentioned about, the 75 awards for disarmament, what if Specera Youth Video Challenge, as well as Pitching Peace, just to provide these different kind of ways and hooks for youth who's passionate about these different kind of like artistic mediums to engage and be educated and empowered on disarmament issues, including nuclear disarmament and also the testing. And so this is kind of the reason why we do this kind of worldwide contests, and going down to sometimes, with our Art for Peace that was held in 2012, going down to the age level of 5. So depending on really the subject and the artistic mediums, we sometimes really take it to the younger age, as well as, to 29, the ages between 18 and 29, which is set by the Youth Peace and Security Resolution, the UN Security Council resolution. So we kind of have that flexibility, and I talked about the agility and adaptability, which is very important, and in ways, creative ways to engage young people. And also one of the ways that we do in Y4D, as well as our office, is that we educate the educators who can take this kind of information and the materials from us and back into the classrooms. So just the long, short is that, we have to come up with creative ways to really kind of bring these discussions and topics into the classrooms using creative means. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on what Sue said, actually, yes, you need to be creative about how to approach this, but maybe this is something you could do, like make it your life goal to put CTBT in the curriculums, and it's doable if there is a sustained campaign, if you address the governments. I mean, they signed the treaty, most of them, some of them ratified, why shouldn't they put it in? I didn't have any questions directed to me, so I'll just think I wrap up this panel by saying that one of the things which I've noticed here, and which is huge accomplishment of the youth group, is that people are actually excited about CTBT and CTBTO. You don't often see people excited by the non-proliferation treaties, like in general. So Hai-Yun and feeling ownership of the treaty. Just another thing, that this is not something, abstract, as you said. This is not something, which floating somewhere there. This is the thing that people do to promote the interest. So I think this is great. So congratulations to Maria, to Dr. Floyd. This is going somewhere.
Andre, thank you. Thank you for ending the session on such a positive note. Please, a warm applause to all our panelists. You have been amazing. Thank you so much. And it is with this promising vision of the CTBT's future from and for the next generation that we will move into our concluding part of the symposium, the closing session featuring our mentorship program and the CTBTO Executive Secretary. We will need 1 minute to readjust the seating arrangement on this scene, so please stay with us. And thank you so very much for your active engagement. And I have seen a lot of hands in the audience. I know we have not been able to take all your questions. Please approach the speakers directly after the closing of the Science Diplomacy Symposium to ask your questions to them. Thank you. I know.
So, good afternoon. A very warm welcome to the closing session of the Science and Diplomacy Symposium. My name is Sabine Bauer. I'm one of the senior advisors in the Office of the Executive Secretary to Dr. Floyd. It's quite incredible how fast these 4 days have passed, wasn't it, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did to meet so many of you from diverse backgrounds, and that you got, as Andrei so nicely wrapped up the previous panel, even more excited about the CTBT and the organization, and that you will continue your engagement with us. I'm very pleased to announce that Dr. Floyd will have taken some minutes to basically surmise over the period of the achievements over the period of the past few days. And then I really warmly invite you to stay on for a certificate ceremony for our wonderful mentees and their respective mentors. So Dr. Floyd, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon.
It's great to see everybody here after 4 days. As Sabine said, I think that time has flown. Unfortunately, I've only been able to dip in and out on different occasions, but always been quite invigorated by what I hear. I must say the last panel, I just love hearing the freshness of younger thoughts on old problems. The beauty is that younger people may not be so encumbered with all of the reasons why not. And that is really important. Really important. I listen to the young people and I think, oh yeah, but, put that aside. Is that so much of what I hear is good sense and is exactly what we need. And so we do need to find the way to get there, rather than say, oh, it's all too difficult, let's put it aside. To me, this is a really valuable contribution that the younger people bring to a meeting such as this, is reminding us of some of those really important things that we need to deliver. So it certainly is my pleasure to address you once again today, this time at the closing of the Science Diplomacy Symposium. To begin, let's reflect together on the past 4 days. Days spent on panel discussions, technical briefings, workshops, even tabletop exercises for those that went to the CTBTO test centre at Cybersdorf. And hopefully days spent engaging, meeting new people, making new connections, inspiring and being inspired. This event offered an exciting glimpse into the wide range of activities that go on behind the scenes to bring the CTBTO's mission to life, to end nuclear tests worldwide and forever. I'm glad that you've joined us and that it's wonderful that you've been able to be here and benefit from this experience, but I really do need to thank some of my staff that have done a huge job at making this happen. Some are sitting down the front here. There's various other ones scattered around. You've seen some of them moderating sessions, but something like this doesn't happen just because it was a good idea. So my deep thanks, those that have been working on the technical aspects, my deep thanks to all of my staff and others that have worked in making this a success and a reality. Personally, I particularly enjoyed the opportunity to meet many of you in the margins of this meeting, as well as the opportunity to be interviewed by 2 members of the CYG. I thought that could be a really awkward time, but it was a lot of fun. So I appreciated that. And to the CYG members, thank you so much for being gentle. That was appreciated. More broadly, it certainly was my pleasure to engage in the intergenerational dialogue, as I mentioned, that's been taking place amongst participants, members of the Young Professional Network, members of the CTBTO Youth Group. It's so great to have all of you here. I do welcome the new ideas that have come out of the different panel discussions over the last days, including on fostering regional cooperation and scientific exchange, to enhance the use of CTBTO data, to inform state disaster risk reduction planning and response, a regional approach. That's a good idea. We need to look at how that might work, as well as to help all states achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We also heard suggestions on ways to further enhance the CTBTO's approach to multilingualism, including the call to treat interpretation as a necessity and not a luxury. The importance of embracing multilingualism was identified as a means to enhance inclusivity and to fully harness the potential of the diverse range of CTBTO stakeholders. I'm going to be listening to or watching the YouTube video of Dr. David Grimes. Too many people have come to me and told me how fantastic it was. And so that's on my to-do list, is to listen to that but it is great to see how, as scientists, as diplomats, as academics, as civil servants, that we can combat misinformation and disinformation to advance our work. That's given me thought, and I'm trying to get this microphone off my chin. And also the issues about how we need to humanize our work to reach a global community about the urgency of ending nuclear tests everywhere and for all time. I look forward to the video and to hearing and seeing what David had to say. And then a final reflection, and this is by no means a comprehensive reflection on the very rich program, but a final reflection, just one thing I'll mention, is from the discussion this week. I'd like to echo what we've heard many times, and that is to move forward with the CTBT. We need to move forward together. I know I can count on you, all of you, as supporters of the CTBT, to help us with this cause, and I thank you. On this note, let me just share a little more about my vision for 2023. As we enter the new year, we will continue to focus on universalisation and on entry into force of our precious treaty. You've already heard about the 6 ratifications this year, and the update is it's still 6. The 7th has not quite landed yet, but it's not far away. And I firmly believe that by the end of 2023, the end of next year, there will be less than a handful of non-Annex II states left to ratify. That is going to be a good place to be. But I've got to say, we will continue to engage with the 8 Annex II states in a dialogue, individually, by first understanding their broader security and political concerns as they relate to the entry into force of the CTBT, and subsequently to work jointly with them on a path forward to address those concerns so that they too might be able to ratify the CTBT. I'm hopeful that through dialogue we can chart a path forward together. This will not be easy, but nothing less should be our goal. And this leads me to a very important part of the SDS program, and that is actually the certificate ceremony. The certificate ceremony for the successful women in STEM who've completed the first pilot CTBTO mentoring program. Because without you, the next generation, we will not be successful in achieving our goal of a permanent, legally binding nuclear test ban, which is an important step towards a world ultimately without nuclear weapons. The CTBTO mentoring program for early career women in STEM from underrepresented geographic regions is an initiative supporting gender equality, geographic diversity, and the empowerment of the next generation. The program entails a rigorous workload, including one-on-one mentoring sessions with PTS mentors, monthly thematic seminars, coupled with skill boosters and sessions on raising awareness of the CTBTO's mission and activities. I'm delighted that our mentees were able to mark the end of the program with their participation in this week's symposium, generously funded by a voluntary contribution from the Richard Lounsbury Foundation. We thank them for that. And to the mentees, this program is already bearing fruit. I was delighted to learn that at least 7 of you decided to formulate research papers to present at the 2023 Science and Technology Conference next June, and we very much look forward to that. I am also delighted to hear that one of our mentees has been nominated by her permanent mission to participate in our activities to train surrogate inspectors, a role that will be crucial once the treaty enters into force. We will also offer that opportunity to 3 other mentees to participate in the on-site inspection division's upcoming regional introductory course in the Slovak Republic. I thank the CTBTO's OSI staff who have worked with our human resources people in coming up with this excellent cooperation and an excellent enhancement to the mentoring program. Finally, to our mentees, as we approach the end of the year, you may be thinking about some New Year's resolutions. In that vein, allow me to suggest to you 5 never forget mantras that you might want to take with you. Firstly, never forget that everything starts with an action, not just an idea. Never forget the power and the impact of the message that you bring to a community. Never forget that fear is temporary, but regret is forever. Never forget to celebrate every win, no matter how small. And never forget that together we can go much further in building a peaceful and just world together. I wish you much success, and I look forward to hearing about your career paths as they unfold. Wonderful mentees. My hope is that you will be a part of the talent pipeline of competitive, highly qualified candidates for future technical positions in the PTS. Stay committed to your aspirations and take good care of yourself. Thank you. Back to you, Sabine.
Thank you, Dr. Floyd. And please, mentees, mentors, come to the stage. I know you have all rehearsed this yesterday, so we have to do this in a bit of a record time because I'm told I have to be out of this room at 5 minutes to 1. So the first mentor-mentee group, mentee first, is Hala Said Ahmad Alises. She's our mentee from Jordan. And Andy Collins, he's our health and safety officer from the on-site inspection division. Next is Afra Abdelrahman Mohammed Bahid from Sudan, together with Yasmina Lasovska. She's an associate administrative officer in the International Monitoring Systems Division. By now, I'm sure you know if I say IMS division. Thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have our mentee with us, namely Amina Belkoyjayeva from Kazakhstan, but Kvesi Enchil, the head of the help desk and deployment unit of the IMS division, is taking the certificate on her behalf. Thank you. Next one is Xiang Li, mentee from Next one is Alina Melina Martinez Olvera, mentee from Mexico. Unfortunately, her mentor, Megan Slinkard, the chief of the software applications section, came down ill this morning of the IDC, so she regretted not to be here. The next one is Xiang Li, mentee from China, together with Carla Perez, radionuclide lead analyst in the IDC division, International Data Center division. See, this comes when you rehearse things. Then suddenly, if the choreography is off, people are a little startled. Okay, Karen Nguna Masala, mentee from Kenya, together with her mentor is Stefka Stefanova, a maintenance engineer from the IMS division. Unfortunately, she also fell in. It's a horrible time, by the way. So I hope you all are healthy. Litania Oktonavrina, mentee from Indonesia. I'm sorry, I probably wasn't really pronouncing your name. Jolanta Kuzmercic Michulic, atmospheric science officer in the IDC division. Then we have Sri Sundari Retonaishi from Indonesia, together with Tatiana Boitsova, training officer in the on-site inspection division. Next, we have Vicky Yoi, Makena Rigungu, mentee from Kenya, with Vera Miljanovic Tamarit, head of the software integration unit in the IDC. Next comes Valentin Bangari, mentee from Kenya, with Emilia Koivisto, geophysical techniques officer in the OSI division. And last but not least, Tu Sarvin Mentin from Myanmar, Martin Kolinovsky, the S&T coordinator in the IDC for 2023, unfortunately couldn't join either, but is very proud of her mentee and has really enjoyed the collaboration. So please prepare all for the group photo. You need to come back here. Come up here. So. Oops. So cute. No, I think you need to go in front or in the middle of the mentees. Much better. So everyone, thank you so much for joining the Science and Diplomacy Symposium, the third of its kind. I invite you all, please, to follow us on our webpage, www.ctbto.org, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, to stay tuned what we are up to or what Dr. Floyd is up to. And we wish you a wonderful holiday season, and mark your calendars, please, for the Science and Technology Conference, which will take place 19th to 23rd June 2023. And with this, the Science Diplomacy Symposium is closed. Thank you.
Dear all, just a quick administrative note. If you received funding and you have not yet signed the form is over there. Please sign the form if you received funding. Thank you. Safe travels home.